We're going to continue on in our lesson about learning about different complements with an E, not with an I. We've talked about two sentence patterns already, subject plus action verb plus direct object, which you had your quiz over and everyone did quite well on. And then subject plus action verb plus indirect object plus direct object. And again, we're not going to spend too much time on these. I just want you to understand that there could be a word, if you see a word between your action verb and your direct object, that there's another option that we've talked about with those. As always, whenever you're working with identifying sentence types, you should be using your notes. That's why we have a notebook that has the different examples in there. So don't be afraid to take that out if you're unsure of what to do or what you're looking for. So the next two sentence patterns that we're going to work on have to do with linking verbs. And so we're going to abbreviate that LV. And they can be followed by these things called predicate nouns and predicate adjectives. And predicate should be a word that you're familiar with. When you first started learning about grammar, you learned about subjects and predicates. So predicate is the verb and everything after it. So when we talked about complements, those words that come after the verb, after action verbs, we have the DO and the IO. After linking verbs, we have a predicate noun and a predicate adjective. So I guess this is a little redundant, but again, when we look at linking verbs, we have these things that we're going to abbreviate with PA and PN. Before we do that, we have to understand what a linking verb is and how it is different from an action verb. And so like its name, linking verb, we want to think of it kind of like a chain, and that's why I have that in the background. It's going to link an adjective or a noun back to the subject. So you'll have your subject and then your linking verb, and then some word that follows the linking verb that either goes back and describes your subject or renames your subject. And we're going to go through the same process, getting rid of prepositional phrases and infinitives, looking for a subject. Now we're just adding a step. When we look for a verb, we have to stop and think, is it an action verb or is it a linking verb? And we haven't really talked much about linking verbs yet. And so these are verbs that you're just going to have to memorize, and eventually you will have a quiz over them. We start with this set of 8. Am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. You might have heard of these verbs when you learned about your helping verbs. They are the same. And so it's really important that you understand how they're being used in a sentence. We also have another 5 that work well with this mnemonic: grabs, grow, remain, appear, become, and seem. And just like any verb, it can be used in present tense or past tense with a singular subject or plural. So sometimes you might have to add an S or an ES or an ED or to change the form of the verb. But this is the base form. And then we have 5 more linking verbs that have to do with the 5 senses. And we look at these verbs describing how objects look, how an object smells, how it feels, how it sounds, and how it tastes. And we're really looking at sensory detail here. Okay, so eventually, again, you're going to have to memorize these. For now, anytime we talk about linking verbs, you need to open your notebook to this page that has all your linking verbs on it. All right, so let's take a look at these 5 sentences. It says, what I want you to do first is pause the screencast and go through and highlight any prepositional phrases. Okay, do that right now. Pause it quickly. All right, and this is what you should have had. So let's look at the first sentence. If we get rid of all of our prepositional phrases, we're left with Mike was ecstatic. We go through the same process, find our subject, who it's about, Mike. Look for my verb, was. Was is on my list of linking verbs, and I want to look to see, does it link a word in the predicate back to the subject? Ecstatic means like really excited. And so it's describing Mike. Excuse me, sorry. All right, so Mike was ecstatic. Again, that adjective goes back and links to our subject, Mike. And it's an adjective and not a noun. We learned at the beginning of the year to check for a noun, you can put the in front of it. I wouldn't say the ecstatic. And so I know that this is a describing word. In the next sentence, after I get rid of my prepositional phrase, I'm left with Liz was my lab partner. My subject is Liz. My verb is was. Now I'm looking for a word that either renames what Liz is or describes Liz. And I have Liz is my lab partner. Now, lab here is an adjective, but it's describing partner. What kind of partner? Lab partner. So just because you see an adjective after the linking verb doesn't mean it's a predicate adjective. The key here is that it has to link back to the subject, and it doesn't here. In this case, lab describes partner, and partner is the word that links back to Liz. Number 3, if I get rid of all my prepositional phrases, I'm left with they are students. The subject is they. The verb is are. It is on my list of linking verbs, so I'm looking for a word that either goes back and describes they as an adjective or a noun that renames it. And I have students. I can check to see if it's a noun, the students. So it's a predicate noun that renames what they are. Number 4, the smoked salmon tastes salty. Looking for my subject, salmon. What does what's the verb for salmon? It tastes. Now, our 5 sense words can be kind of tricky because it could be an action verb. If I was talking about the salmon taking its taste buds or taking its mouth and actually chewing something up and tasting something, that would be the action. But in this case, I'm describing the taste of the fish. It tastes salty. So this is a linking verb. It's not showing the action of using your mouth and chewing something up. It's used as a linking verb to describe the taste of the salmon. So we have to be really careful with those sensory linking verbs. And then the last sentence we're going to do now, the air smells fresh. What's the subject? The air. Look for my verb, the air smells. Now again, I have to stop and think. Is it talking about the air using its nose to sniff and smell something? Or is it being used as a linking verb to describe the smell of the air? And so in this case, we've got an adjective describing how the air smells. It's a predicate adjective linked back to our subject. Okay, so the most important thing you're going to need to make sure you do right now is learn those linking verbs. For now, you'll be allowed to use your list and determine the difference between an adjective and a noun. And again, a noun, you can put the in front of, and an adjective is a describing word. So what I want you to do now, on the blackboard in the back of the room, there's a little thing on the wall with exit slips. I want you to pick one from that bin. Follow our routine to label the sentence pattern. Don't forget to highlight the prepositional phrases. And then you're going to decide, is it a subject, a linking verb, and a PA? And label them, or find the subject, the linking verb, and the PN if it's a noun. Once you're done, I want you to bring your paper to me and I'll check it. And you can work on your vocabulary flip book. If you have any questions, raise your hand.